Hey there friends, I'm Alex Lokes and Happy New Year. Yes, it is 2025, so I thought for the opening video of the new year that I would share with you my entire camera collection. It is actually a lot larger after you sort of sit down and look at it all, so I'm going to break it up into a few easy bite-sized sections. And this isn't going to have any graphics, it's not a review of each camera, it's just going to be me sharing with you the cameras in my collection because everyone seems to be doing it and I haven't had a chance to actually sit down and do it in sort of any way. So this is completely improv, no script, no nothing, just me here at home on my couch with a lot of the cameras. So let's get into it. Okay, so for this first batch of cameras, these are my shelf queens. And by shelf queens, these are the cameras that are sort of more on display in my home rather than in a regular rotation. It doesn't mean that they don't work. Almost every single one of them is still functional in some way, shape, or form. There is only one that I can guarantee does not work anymore. And this is a mix of some of the older cameras that I have or cameras that have been gifted to me by either my family or extended family or my wife and my wife's extended family. All right, so we're gonna actually start off with the oldest camera that I own. And that's this one. This is a Canadian-made Kodak Hawkeye Model 2 number 2 Model C, and this was produced right here in Ontario in Toronto at the former Kodak plant. Building number 9 is the only piece that still survives. It's part of the Metrolinx now. This camera was produced in 1915, so it is getting on to be 110 years old now. And one of the best parts about this is that it takes 120 film, so I can actually still go out and shoot with it, but I don't for several reasons. One, it's over 100 years old. Two, it's not made entirely of metal. It's sort of a leatherette covered cardboard on it. And yeah, it's the one that really suffers from fat rolls, and yeah, it's really old, but it's just fun to say like, hey look, I can still use this camera that's over 100 years old. So that's just a really neat part of my collection. Next up is the Agfa Box 50. This is again a German-made 120 camera. This was a gift to my Opa Oosthoek, so my mom's father, when he left the Netherlands in the 1950s to emigrate with his family, including my mom, to Canada. And this is a camera that has since passed to my mom's brother, my uncle, my mom, and it's now in my hands. So hopefully one day it will continue to be in the family. Again, takes 120 film, so I can still take it out. I have a lot of really cool memories about seeing this camera sitting on a shelf at my childhood home. Plus, I really like that Art Deco faceplate. Sticking with the Agfa theme, this is an Agfa Isoli Junior. This came to me from a fellow member of Knox Presbyterian Church. This was his childhood camera, and his father was a photographer also, and we'll get a little bit into that later. But what makes this one really neat is that it is essentially a box camera, and it takes 120 film, but it shoots it in a 4x4 format instead of 6x6. So you can actually get 16 shots on a roll of 120, but it's still square format. Alright, we're still on Agfa, and this is the Agfa Click 2. It gets its name because it clicks for the shutter. This is the second version of the Agfa Click. A couple of improvements over the original one. Again, takes 120 film, shoots 6x6. It's just a really fun camera, and just one of those where it's like, I really like it. It has a neat little classic mid-century design. Decent optics. It's a 2-element lens instead of a single, and yeah, I just keep it around because it looks cool, it sounds cool, and I really like the results I get from it. Now, if you are a fan of the film photography project, this one will be instantly familiar. This is the bigger version of the Click. This is the Agfa Clack, and as you can hear, the shutter makes a clacking noise. This is the only version of the Clack I've ever produced. This is an early one because it has a metal body instead of the later productions, which were plastic. 6:9 format. The shutter is a little bit wonky on here, and there's a bit of the lens barrel that is falling off. I should figure out how to fix that. And the shutter tends to stick open, so I think if the shutter ever goes, I might try to convert this to just have a pinhole and set the shutter to be strictly on bulb and kind of figure it out from there. But yeah, it's a fun camera, pretty decent optics thanks to that curved film plane. But again, because of that shutter problem, I don't really take it out that often, so it makes for a great shelf queen and fits in with all my other Agfas. Alright, so this is the one camera that I genuinely know does not work. This is a, again, Canadian-made Kodak Instamatic 304. This belonged to my dad's mom, so my Omalaux. This was her camera, and she was able to produce some absolutely incredible shots with this. I have had a chance to look at some of the slides that she shot with this camera, like Ektachrome and Kodachrome. And it's absolutely amazing the quality that this little consumer camera produced. One thing that really strikes me is how big it is. It is a chunky camera, and it is just really fun to just have this sitting up on the shelf. Even though it's an 126 Instamatic cartridge, the reason it doesn't work is twofold. You got the selenium meter here is quite dead, and it controls everything. And then there is a battery down here that drove some of it, and it had that little flash cube attachment. So yeah, really nice to have this camera on my shelf, especially considering the fact of the next camera. You've probably seen one of these before. This is a Pentax K1000, and this belonged to my Opalaux. Yeah, so this is the camera that he always had, and I have very fond memories of him using this camera. So it was really nice when this finally came into my possession. It's a little beat up, but you know what? I do need to send it off to get serviced. The film advance needs a bit of work. Last time I used it, it sort of tore up the sprocket holes. Some of the leatherette's coming off, but you know what? It has character. Now, when I got this, this only came with a couple of lenses, a Vivitar 28mm f2.8 and a Pentax 200mm f4. I've since increased the lens system for this, so I've replaced the Vivitar with a Pentax M28 and a 55mm f2 and still that 200. So hopefully if one of his great-grandchildren get into photography, I can get this fixed and pass it on to them. And keeping with the grandparent theme, this is a Kodak Pony 135 Model C, and this belonged to my wife's paternal grandfather, so Grandpa McCullough. This was the camera that captured my father-in-law's childhood, and again shot a lot of slide film with it. It has seen a lot of use, and I've only had a chance to shoot this once. I was meaning last year to do a video review of this camera, but it just never fit into the cards. So hopefully I can get this onto the review bench for you this year. But yeah, it's just really nice to have this camera sitting around. It's had that nice classic mid-century Kodak look, plus the Kodak red dot. Kodak did it just like Leica did, so that's really cool to see. And then here is another nice little folder. This is a Jiffy Kodak 2. Now, you've probably heard of the Jiffy Kodak. It had a nice Art Deco faceplate here. The 2 did not have this. This one I don't shoot that often because it is a 620 camera. Now, I can get 620 film from the FPP, and I still have a roll laying around, so maybe on 620 day I will take this thing out again and shoot it. But yeah, it's just really nice. 2-position lens, fixed shutter, dual viewfinders. So yeah, it's just really nice, and plus the it has a really nice lens pop out here. So this belonged to great grandma Anne, who is yeah, one of my wife's great grandmothers. So really nice to have this. I used to have the original box. I think I might have it tucked away somewhere, but that's where you get the Art Deco from. But yeah, no, really fun camera, great to have that. Now, this camera did not necessarily come from my direct family. This belonged to my mom's brother-in-law's father, so my Uncle Harvey. This was his father's camera, one of them. It's a Voigtlander Bessa, back when the Bessa was a folding camera. This one I think dates to about the mid-1930s. So I've only shot a couple of rolls through it. It is a scale focus camera, and when I was working with it initially, I really wasn't sure about setting the scale focus and the aperture to sort of get that maximum depth of field. But now that I have a similar camera that I'll be sharing with you later, I should be able to take this out. But the one thing that I do struggle with this camera is that even though it can take 120 film, the take-up spool works much better on a 620. So I'll really only shoot black and white in here so I can recover that 620 take-up spool. So it does make it a little harder to shoot, but it definitely has a early 20th century charm. Okay, so let's talk medium format cameras. And obviously we're gonna start off with my Mamiya M645. This is a go-to camera for me when shooting medium format. What's really great is that it has interchangeable lenses, and I have a really nice lens kit for this. I love working it with the waist level finder. It's nice, it's compact, especially with that ADF 2.8 on it. It's just a really fun camera to use in the field. While traveling, I can bring a full system with me. The one downside is I do need to have an external meter for it, and I do need to replace some of the light seals, but the red-green fix, my apologies for using black Mr. Green instead of the classic silver, but it seems to keep the light leaks out, especially along the bottom. I should get those light seals replaced one day. And this is by far the pride and joy of my collection. This is my Rolleiflex 2.8F, and you remember that Isoli Jr.? This was the gentleman's father's camera, and he bought it in Germany in 1969, and then I bought it off of him. So I am owner number 2 on this camera, which is rare for something this old. But the best part is I got this before the big TLR craze took place, before Vivian Maier became a thing in the public consciousness. So this is a great compact medium format camera. I love working with the waist level finder, love that it still has a functioning selenium meter. It's really great for travel. I love working with the 6x6 format, and I like this camera better than when I had a Hasselblad, and I don't have one of those anymore. So this is the camera that I will usually reach for, and you've seen it in a ton of my previous videos. And then going something a little different for 6x6, my Holga. This is a Holga 120N. This is my second Holga I've owned. I had a original Holga, the 120S, but I gave it away and then ended up picking up the new Holga 120N. One thing is weird is that people say, oh, you know, they always have different light leaks. I don't have that problem with mine, so I don't know. Is mine a good copy or a bad copy? Either way, I like the results I get out of this camera. It's fun to reach for. I do tend to use it mostly around Holga week, but that's really why I keep it around. I do want to try to get my hands on one of the panoramic Holgas that takes the big long stretch of 120 film with an actual optical lens on it, but those things are pretty expensive, so that might not be in the cards. But yeah, other than that, my Holga. As you can tell, 6x6 is a favorite format of mine. This is my one and only pinhole camera. This is the Scura 6x6. This camera I keep only because it was such a pain in the butt to actually make and assemble. It is 3D printed. It's actually really fun. It's a bit of a pain to work with, so I don't use it that often. But yeah, I have a pinhole camera. I keep it around. I use it every so often. So that's that. Now I do have a couple of folders. This first one is just a Zeiss Ikon Ikonta. This is a 645 model. It is post-war. I don't use it that often, but it's just nice to keep around because a folder makes for a great little, easy to throw in the bag and doesn't take up much room. Yeah. Plus, they just look really cool. And then I also have the big brother. This is a post-war Zeiss Ikon Super-Ikonta. It has a rangefinder on it, although it is a little difficult to, it's very, very squinty, so I tend to use the, set the aperture to between f11, f16, and then set the focus to about 48 feet. And that sort of gives me enough depth of field, especially with the big 6x9, and just sort of compose. The one thing that is really weird is I need to sort of use it backwards. I'm so used to having the shutter release here, but that is actually the bed release, but it's here. It's a little difficult to use. I would prefer if it was a little bit down here, but yeah, other than that, I don't use it that often. But what makes this really neat is it has the original photography shop where it was bought. It has this little plaque here on the bottom. So gives a little bit of history to this great little 6x9 rangefinder folder. Okay, so if you've been following my work for some time, you'll know that my main camera system is Nikon. But in the same line, if I am shooting a pro job, I tend to shoot hybrid. I shoot both 35mm and digital at the same time. Digital mainly for color, black and white film in it. And this is the camera that I bring along. The Nikon F5, this was the last SLR in their professional line of cameras that was marketed directly to professionals. There is the F6, and it is also a pro body, but by the time the F6 was released, it was much more aimed at the luxury photography market rather than the professional one. So this came out in '98. I specifically photographed a wedding and charged them the correct amount so that I could go out and buy one of these. This was my grail camera when I first got into Nikon autofocus. And back then these were still pretty expensive, and I ended up getting this one for under $1,000, but I still paid almost close to $800. You can get these pretty cheap these days, so if this one ever dies, I'll probably just get another F5, or if I can find an F6 at an affordable price, I'll probably jump on that. And well, I no longer have that first Nikon autofocus body, the F80 anymore. I do have its smaller cousin, the F65. This is completely opposite of my F5. The F65 is a entry-level consumer grade body. Getting a bit sticky on the edges, so I do need to take care of that. But you know what? For what it is actually a very capable camera. There are a couple little niggly problems with it. I can't manually set the ISO, and there's no real setting for manual rewind or any stuff like that. It is a lot more plasticky than even my F80. And the one thing I really dislike about it is that it only has a single command dial at the back, and in manual mode it controls the shutter, and you have to sort of press and hold an aperture button to adjust the aperture. So very Canon-like from a Nikon camera. Okay, now on to the manual bodies. This is the one I reach for the most for my manual kit. This is the Nikon FE2. This is the follow-up to the FE. I really like that it just has a little bit nicer styling to it, and I really like the meter on this, and just having that option to go up to 1/4000th of a second. It takes an MD12 motor drive, which I do have in my possession. The one problem is this one is needing a bit of repair work. Sometimes the shutter release doesn't pop all the way up after I've fired the shot, and the follower for the lens aperture moves one way but doesn't come back the other way. So I do need to take this in and send it in for repair. And I don't know what it would entail, but if it does need a new lens mount, I might have to borrow it from the next camera. And that would be this one, the Nikon FE. This was the first of the compact lines to have semi-automatic operations. It only goes up to 1/1000th of a second, so it uses that legendary Copal square shutter. And the one really nice thing about this is that it has the ability to use pre-AI lenses on it, because you can actually release and flip up the follower. So I might just be able to, hopefully in the hands of the right repair person, lift this whole assembly up and take it over to the FE2 and have a custom FE2. I'm not sure if that's possible or not, but a guy can dream. I don't take this one out that often. I keep it around simply because eventually I do want to turn this into a press pan. It's just a matter of finding that right Mamiya lens first. And then finally, the old dog in the stable of my Nikon kit is this one, the Nikkormat FT2. This was a gift from my good friend Bill Smith when he was working on moving out and into Toronto. And he is known for his vast collection of Nikkormat cameras. So what we could really say is this was a trade, because I had gifted him an FT3 a while back, and the FT2. Personally, I think this is the ultimate in the Nikkormat line, because it can work with any AI, AIS, or pre-AI lens, providing that it has the claw on the optic. So pretty much all but one can be mounted onto this camera. The meter is a bit off, but that's fine. It's an all-mechanical camera, so you don't really need the meter on this, because everything will still work. The one thing that is different, you need to do that shuffle with the lens mount and the aperture ring to get it to index properly. But yeah, other than that, I really like this camera. I haven't taken it out that much this year, but hopefully it will see a little more work this year. Okay, all right. That wraps it up for Nikon. On to the next one. Okay, so when I first started with photography, I shot exclusively Minolta. My first camera was the Minolta Highmatic 7S, and then I went into the SR series, specifically the SRT, and then the X series of cameras. Now, I have completely divested myself from the Minolta manual focus cameras. My last one was an XE7, which I gifted to my good friend Ali, along with all my lenses. I was in the process of clearing stuff out, and I just wanted it to go to someone who would really appreciate it. But I didn't get out of Minolta completely. I went strictly with autofocus. And the reason for that being was when I was shooting the Minolta manual focus SLRs, the Maxxum or the Alpha line of cameras were still pretty prevalent. And I really liked them. In fact, I really wanted to get into the Maxxum series, specifically a Maxxum 5. And I did find one at a shop here in Milton, but they wanted way too much money, and I'm glad I didn't buy it, because good chance it was probably stolen. So, thankfully, all my current Minolta Maxxum gear has come to me through more legal means. So we're going to start off with this one. This is the Maxxum 70. This was one of the last 35mm cameras built by Konica Minolta before they divested all their camera stuff to Sony. I really like this camera. It has a great look feel to it for its age. It keeps that sort of early 2000s look that came in with the previous generation of cameras. It's small, it's compact, it does what I need it to, and the best part is it works with every single A-mount lens that I own, plus some of the ones that I don't own because they have that internal motor drive. And the reason I don't invest in those is because of my personal favorite. And that would be this one. This is the Maxxum 9. This is a beast of a camera. I love working with it, especially since I have the integrated battery grip. If I am just shooting 35mm at a professional gig where I'm getting paid, this is the camera I reach for, because A, it looks awesome, and B, I have a lot of nice lenses for it, especially in the zoom lens range. I don't have anything like high-end or super fast like I keep in my Nikon stable, but I have a lot of really fun lenses for this kit. So yeah, I really like the metering, the look, the styling. It just stands out totally. Now the trouble is that I know this camera will eventually die, and if I do have to replace it, it won't be with another 9 unless I can get my hands on a TI with that autofocus module to support those internal autofocus drives. But if I can't find that, it will probably end up being replaced by a Maxxum 7, as long as I can get that VC7 grip as well. And the last one in my Minolta kit is the Dynax 600 SI Classic. Now, what drew me to this camera was that when I was working on the research of the history of the Maxxum 9, this camera popped up because it sort of went away from what Minolta was doing with their Maxxum line. They were getting away from physical knobs and dials, going for buttons, knobs, switches, etc. to control the functions. This went back in the opposite direction, and in its time it wasn't really appreciated and didn't sell really well, but it made a splash because the 9 and the 7 used the same sort of hybrid control interface, and it continues to inspire retro-designed mirrorless cameras today, like the Sony A7. I like this because it's small, it's compact. I have the grip on it, but the grip can come off. I like to keep it on because it really doesn't add much weight or height to the camera. This is a great one for traveling when all I want to bring is 35mm film, because again, I can use all my lenses on it or just stick with a nice zoom like the 24-105, which was the kit lens that came with the Maxxum 7. So yeah, and what also I really like is that even though it's an Alpha and my other two are Maxxums, this one's a European one because it's Dynax, so it's just that little bit different. And while primarily I might, in the 35mm realm, stick with Minolta and Nikon, that doesn't mean that I am not aware of or dislike Canon, because I seem to have gained a small stable of Canon cameras as well. First of them being the Canon AE1. This was one of the first CPU controlled cameras out there. Shutter priority. This came from a good friend and fellow reenactor, Craig Williams. It's a good camera, I like it. I don't bring it out that often because honestly I have a lot more lenses with Nikon and Minolta than I do with Canon FD mounts, but the one reason why I keep this one around is because it's a historically significant camera. And as someone who is a big history nerd and got it from another big history nerd, it's well worthwhile. It's a good camera. Does it live up to the hype? Eh, not really. But I would take my AE1 over an AE1 program any day, simply because I like the styling of it. It's a little bit more simplistic and helps me to think differently, think in shutter priority rather than my default, which is aperture priority. So yeah, the AE1. And speaking of historically significant Canon cameras, and that's going to be a bit of a theme, we have the AL1. Now this came from Uncle Ray. This was his mother's camera. Uncle Ray is my wife's uncle, my mother-in-law's brother-in-law, and ever since he met me, he's been wanting to get this camera into my hands, and he finally did. What makes the AL1 unique in two ways. One is that it is an aperture priority camera based on the AV1, but it also uses the QF, or quick focus system. So it uses a specially etched mirror and a trio of CCD sensors to help put the object at the center of your frame in focus. This was the precursor to Canon's first autofocus camera, the T80, that was also based on the FD mount. I don't take this out that often. I've only taken it out a couple of times. I've really liked the results because it uses the nice Canon FD glass. But yeah, it's just really weird, and once you get it off of aperture priority, it is very limited in manual mode. But yeah, it's the Canon that works like a Nikon, and yeah, again, pretty historically significant from a Canon standpoint. And then keeping on with that theme, we have the EOS 650. This came from my wife's great uncle George. The first time I met them, they learned about my love of film photography and promptly handed me over this beautiful EOS 650. So this is another camera that I am owner number 2 of, or rather steward number 2 of. And it's significant because this was the first EOS camera that Canon released, and I came with the Nifty 50, the 51.8 first gen, and this is what started me down that wonderful rabbit hole, which is the EOS line. This is a bit noisy, a bit clunky. It came from the 80s, so what do you expect? But I really like the styling of it, and I don't take it out that often, but it's just nice to have, and I really don't want to get rid of it for obvious reasons. Plus, it's just so unique. I just like that sort of notch design that they kind of dropped once they moved into the second generation of EOS cameras. If I am shooting EOS cameras, this is the one I will reach for. This is the most recent arrival in my camera stable. This is the Elan 7, so it came out in the early 2000s, so it is relatively new when it comes to my camera collection, but this makes for a great low choice camera system to bring along because I don't have that much Canon glass. I got the 28, the 40, and the 50, and I finally got my hands on a 28-105, which adds a nice all-around general purpose elevated kit lens. So it's really nice to finally have that option and a really rock solid EOS Elan in my camera kit. This is the camera that made me like Canon EF. And then last and probably least is the Canon EOS 3000. This was the camera that I ran last year's Frugal Film project with, and it's a good camera. I just never really bonded with it that well. It's a little small, a little limited. I think a lot of what I disliked about it came from this optic, the 28-80. I found it lacking in a lot of spaces. It's just, it feels a little small in my hands. Again, after using the Elan 7 for so long now, and the F5 and the Maxxum 9, this camera just seems really, really small. But you know what? It's still perfectly capable. The grip in my big mitts, it just never worked. But yeah, it's really not a bad camera. Very entry level. Great way to get into 35mm photography if you're starting from a 0 point with the Canon EF architecture. Okay, before I get into the last batch of cameras, I'd be remiss if I didn't include, this is my Graflex Pacemaker Crown Graphic. This is a late Graflex ink manufactured version because it has the top rangefinder. This is my sole large format camera in my collection. It might be a press camera, but I use it very much as a view or field camera. It's just really nice to have that option. I don't take it out that much because of all the amount of extra stuff I need to bring along, and I really need to be in the mood to really sit down and have the patience to shoot large format. But yeah, this is a really nice camera that I keep around, and it seems to be the one that suits my style of photography, shooting in urban environments, not using a lot of movements, etc. So yeah, this is my Crown Graphic. Great little camera, plus it's nice and compact, although I would really need to want to go anywhere long distance, not in a car, to bring this one along. I did have a project going to Europe in 2018 to do 100 sheets of 4x5s at 100 different World War I sites for the centennial of the end of that war. But plans changed. I got married, and it was a much better adventure, I think. So maybe one day, but it will probably not be with this. All right, so if you are still with me, wonderful. We have reached the last batch of cameras, and that are the odds and sods, the one-offs in my collection that I don't really have a lot of extra gear for or take out that often, but I kind of really like them, and I don't want to get rid of them for a couple reasons. They've been a gift, or they're unique or rare, or I'm just waiting to build a kit for them before I actually put them up for a video review or just having the time. So we're just going to go through them. It's yellow, which means this is a waterproof camera. This is the Minolta Weathermatic 35DL. This was their second waterproof camera. They also released a APS SLR waterproof camera and a 110 waterproof camera. This was a gift in one of the Emulsive Secret Santas. The guy who sent it to me was like, hey, you have harsh Canadian winters. This is great. And you know what? It does stand up to the cold weather. What really is cool is that the water sealing looks really, really good on the film door. It's a bit compromised up here, so I don't know. I don't really feel like I can trust bringing it underwater, but I keep it around because A, it's cool, B, it's the only point and shoot camera that I have that has a dual lens function, so it has two focal lengths, but it's only like a 35mm and a 50mm, so you can switch between them, and it just looks really cool, and it works really well in the cold and the snow and the winter while wearing gloves. I definitely have this one up for review, and by the time you're seeing this, chances are it has been done and it's just waiting in the wings for this month, actually. Yeah, this month. So yeah, watch out for that. I really, really like this camera. It's fun, it's unique, and it's different from every other camera I use. I do still have a Polaroid. This is the Polaroid 1. This was one of the last 600 series cameras to produce, and I really like it because it kind of looks like a Spectra. I really like that sort of Star Wars, James Bond-esque look to the Spectras, but since you can't get the film, there's no point in having one around other than to sit on the shelf. It still works really, really well, and for what they are, it does a really good job. Again, this is one I hope to get up for review this year. Just need to go splurge and get a couple of packs of film to do that, especially now that Polaroid is actually really good at quality control. Yep, so Polaroid 1, this was a gift from a friend, and the only Polaroid left in my stable. Everyone needs a good Russian camera in their arsenal, and this is mine. This is a Zenit E, and yes, it has the beautiful Helios 44 58mm f2 lens on the front of it. I do want to get this one up for review. The only problem is that I only have the one lens, and everyone knows what this lens does. So I am just biding my time, waiting for some affordable lens options for this camera to come out so I can take it out again, do a bit of shooting. So if you do have a suggestion for some lenses or a source where I could get something wider than the 58, anything like sort of within the 35 to 28mm range, and something a little bit longer in sort of the 100mm range, and that is a fair price. Like, I don't really want to pay more than $100 Canadian for it in M42 mount. So let me know in the comments. But yeah, what I really like about this one is that it uses the Cyrillic spelling of it, and it is not from the main factory. It's from it has a different maker's mark on it, which these weren't known for their high quality cameras, but this one actually still works. Sadly, the selenium meter is dead in them, but that's pretty much par for the course. And then one of two 35mm rangefinders in my collection, the Contax 3A. I really like this camera. I'm not much of a rangefinder guy, but this one I keep around simply because it is definitely looks the part of what someone would do, a pro photographer, a war photographer would use in the Second World War, despite being a post-war camera. Plus, I really like the Zeiss sonar lens that is on this. The one trouble with this camera is the shutter is capping. I can't really shoot it over 1/500th of a second. If I take it to the full top speed, the shutter tends to cap or just not fire at all. But yeah, I do have a second lens for this, but I really like the 50 f1.5. And here's the other rangefinder. This is the Graflex Century 35, which was made under contract by Kowa in Japan. This is another great mid-century rangefinder camera. It's heavy, it's a beast. It actually produces some really nice images for what it is. And yeah, it looks really nice. And if I had a bigger space to display cameras on, this would definitely sit as a shelf queen. But sadly I don't, so it lives with all the rest of the one-offs. All right, this one you probably haven't seen in a while. This is the LOMO LCA Plus from Lomography. This was one of the first cameras that I reviewed on my channel when I was still trying to figure out how to do camera reviews. I like this camera. It's really fun. I got a really great deal on it, as in it showed up at my front door here in the condo from one of our neighbors. It is the Chinese-made LCA Plus version, not the original Lomography that they went to LOMO and contracted them out to continue to make the LOMO LCA. The problem is that the shutter's starting to get a bit dodgy on this one, so I don't take it out that option often. I would like to go and redo my camera review video on this one in my new style. So I may do that, but yeah, other than that, even though the shutter's dodgy, I keep it around. I would like to get my hands on either the original LOMO LCA, like produced in the Soviet Union, or the early Lomography contract produced LCA, but those are starting to jump up a little bit in price, so I'll just stick to my little cheap Chinese knockoff of a knockoff. How about that? And then last but not least is the LOMO Appart. This is another Lomography camera. I really like it because it has that 21mm wide angle lens on it, so just that 1mm wider than the Reto Ultra Wide and Slim. The Reto I have since passed along to another photographer, and they are getting some wonderful results out of it, but the Appart I have kept around. I haven't done a video review on this one yet. Again, I really should. I don't have a lot of toy cameras, so I like to keep, I have my Holga, and then I have this one in the 35mm, so I'm pretty much set. Yeah, it's nice, it's basic. Can't really go wrong with it. I really like the design and styling of the black. I do not use the flash on this thing. I strictly use it outdoors with natural light. And I have all the accessories. Lomography was really great in the sense that they shipped a ton of accessories with the camera. So hopefully when I finally take this out for a video review, I can try out some of those, like the prism and the splitzer, and try some multi-exposure with this thing. So something for the future. All right, so that covers it for this video, and I just want you to thank you again, everyone who continues to subscribe, like, and comment on my videos. You're going to notice a few logistical changes on how these videos are produced and seen online. This one you'll notice did not have any sort of title sequence. I am working on getting a sort of a stock title sequence to insert into every video, so I'm not having to do something weird each time, but just have something that sort of fits the flow of the video. If you are a fan of Polaroid and have seen some of the stuff that Just Another Chris has produced, I'm thinking of doing something along those same lines, so he's definitely inspired me to insert that in. I don't know how to look yet, but it is what it is. Another thing is, this year at the very end of the year, I'm going to be doing a complete video on questions and answers. So if you have any questions you want me to answer about myself, my life, my photography, anything, just leave it in the comments below and I will collect them over the course of the year, and the last video of 2025 will be a video about those questions and me giving the answers as best as possible. And if you have an idea for a video that you want me to do, again, feel free to leave me a comment or hit me up on any of my usual social any of my social media channels, and I'd be more than happy to work with you and get something together that hopefully will answer those more long form questions. You'll also notice that starting this year I will be not doing an end credit sequence, because that is actually a little thing from high school where my teacher would actually deduct marks if you didn't have end credits, but they really don't make sense anymore. So any of the details that were in those end credits are now going to be found in the description below. So as always, if you do like what you see, give me a thumbs up. If you don't, give me a thumbs down. It doesn't really matter to me. And if you are new to the channel, please consider subscribing, hitting that bell notification icon. Here in 2025, I am still releasing videos twice a month approximately on Wednesdays. So until next time, shoot what you love with what you love on what you love. Don't give in to the hype.